I left retail a few years ago and noticed a dramatic improvement in my physical and mental health, largely due to the reduced contact with the listless cattle you see in the stores. However, it seems that the customer service vibe never completely washes off because I was recently accosted in a liquor store by a woman with a jean jacket and the all-too-familiar haircut we all know and hate. The particular store in question is part of a chain set up like a reduced-size Sam's Club, but the only things they sell are booze and cigars. Great place to blow a paycheck. I got to leave work a little early due to working some extra hours at the beginning of the week, and I was completely fried. The plan was to grab a craft beer I'd never tried and maybe some slightly pricier bourbon and just chill. My work's dress code was flexibly business casual, so I was wearing dress shoes, slacks with a dark polo, which is regrettably similar to the store's uniform. Only some of the associates wore aprons, and all of them had the store name embroidered on the polos. I was knelt down near the end of a beer aisle when I overhear a woman talking to her boyfriend one row over. They're trying to find a nitrous stout and aren't seeing it because the aisle they're in sorts by local beer and the one they want is from out of state. Conveniently about 2 shelves over from me, I speak up and wander around the corner to let them know where I saw it, and they thank me and ask if I've had it before. We chat briefly about 1 or 2 others that we've had that are similar but not as good, and then I get back to my browsing. Then I feel a tap on my shoulder. Karen, excuse me. Me, sorry. Am I in your way? Karen, no, but can you help me find where the XEZ brand is? It was a brand of whiskey I'd never heard of. What kind of liquor is that? I think it's a whiskey. Okay, do you know if it's a bourbon or an Irish whiskey? Or Karen, pulling a mock sad face, says, I don't. Sorry. Well, the whiskeys are 3 aisles that way with the bourbons on the left side and everything else on the right. Unless it's scotch, which is over there. Aren't you going to take me there? Sorry. I've got to pick up my own stuff and get home. There should be someone around here who knows the selection a bit better. I can't believe you won't help me. That's really rude. Lady, I don't work here. I just drink a lot. I want to talk to your manager. At this point, I was yet unseasoned to the ways of this entitled trash, so I shook my head and turned around to keep looking for my own stuff. I hear a soft, scorned little gasp behind me and feel the nails digging into my shoulder. Preface. I am not a well-adjusted individual. I have a family history of untreated conditions, and I was lucky to get out of secondary school with PTA in all of my teeth. My bodily autonomy and personal space are very important to me, and while I am patient and understanding in almost every other regard, this is one issue that you do not push with me. The split second between feeling her dig in and realizing what's going on, my brain's rapid prompting methods have buried the needle, and I am half a restrained impulse from biting off her manicured princess fingers and gouging out her eyes. I opt instead to take a lesson from our primate cousins in Dragon Ball Z. When things get bad, yell to assert your power. Me with a roar so loud it left me hoarse for like 2 days after. Get your hands off me! The store goes dead quiet. I grab her hand, wrench it off me, and shove her away with both hands. She stumbles, bumps into a shelf, but doesn't fall over. She's looking at me the way a cow looks at an oncoming train. Eyes saucer, wide in disbelief and incredulity, the fear not quite managing to take hold yet. She opens her mouth to say something that was probably how dare you or something similar, but I'm already frothing at the mouth. Me still screaming and stumbling over my words a bit. Never touch me, ever! I will rip you in half. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Every time it looks like she's going to interject, I cut her off with another leave me alone. By now, management and one of the other associates are booking it over to defuse what they're sure is going to be imminent violence, and by all appearances, they're right. My face is red, my body is shaking, and while I'm not that big of a dude, I'm poised for a fight against a comparatively small woman. Manager, sir, you need to calm down. Me, I am calm. She needs to keep her hands to herself. Karen, he assaulted me. Call the police. Me, not as loud. Voice cracking. Go ahead, lady. I'll wait. You started this. Associate, sir, I need you to come with me. I'm buying my beer and leaving. Check your security tapes. She came after me first. Karen, to manager. I want him fired. Me, I told you. I don't work here. What is wrong with you? Manager, sir, I told you to calm down. I interrupt. Look at this. I pull my shirt collar over and show them where her nails dug in. There's no blood, but it's pretty obvious the marks are fresh and that I didn't do it to myself. Me, you decide to call the police, then pull the tapes and I'm pressing charges? It seems to have dawned on Karen that she might have messed up. She hasn't said anything. There's a crowd watching us at this point. I see at least one cell phone recording. I turn to a random person standing nearby. Me, did you see what happened? Young guy. Not all of it. I saw her holding you and you pushed her away. Me, voice cracking like teenagers. Thank you. Thank you. Manager, there's no need to get the police involved. "Sir, you can leave. Ma'am, you're no longer welcome into our store. Please leave." At this point, I grabbed the six-pack I was looking at and start to leave. I walked towards the tills and set my beer on the counter. The attendant at the desk was looking over my shoulder at the manager, but he must have given her the okay because she scans me out and I leave with my beer. Morale of the story: embrace your inner howler monkey. Don't give them a chance to think or wind up their usual indignant tirade. This happened a few years ago, but after working over 10 years in retail, starting while I was 16 to save for college and amenities, I've run into many Karens, but this one particular lady still gives me flashbacks. This is a long one, but I promise just the absolute entitlement of this woman is worth it. I was 23 at the time. I had been working at 7-Eleven. My coworker, we shall call her Liz, was working with me. This particular day was July 11th. If you've ever gone to or worked for 7-Eleven on that day, you know that July 11th, 7-Eleven is their promotional day. Some predetermined amount of child-sized Slurpees are given away for free. It would depend on the amount of guests. Some years it was universal across the board. Usually 100, 200-ish free child-sized Slurpees. These are often all claimed by 12 p.m. at our location. It was now roughly 7 p.m. We hadn't had anyone come in for a few hours asking about the promotion, but it was busy with regular customers as it was hot and gas was cheap. Our location had an attached gas bar. A lady, about 40, came in with a Chihuahua Russell mixed dog. At first I ignored it until she set the dog down, and it began to charge other customers, trying to bite and was growling and barking. Truthfully, I almost always ignored patrons with small dogs they could carry. They were generally always well behaved and there wasn't a spot to tie them up outside. So if I didn't hear the dog, I didn't mention the dog. But this lady had no control of her animal, and the situation was fast becoming a liability. At which point, while keeping a distance, I told her she can't have the dog in the store, as its behavior was a liability for both of us. She began to proclaim she knew her rights and the law and the dog was allowed. I asked her if the dog was a service animal or emotional support animal. No, but it's my dog. I can have my dog in here. She was getting visibly annoyed, and after some back and forth, she walked her dog to the front door and threw it out the door on the pavement near a man she must have been accompanied with. And when I say threw, I mean threw. This dog was thrown 5 feet to the pavement and bounced off, before walking off to the side of the man waiting outside. That there let me know that this woman was going to be a handful. After she had hurled her dog to the pavement, she came back into the store and selected a few items. 2 Coca-Cola cans, some candies, and she wanted hot food. "I want a free Slurpee," she loudly said, looking around at other patrons as if to elicit attention to herself. I calmly expressed it was promotional, and we ran out of the promotional cups and began to ring her items through. I couldn't give her a free one if I wanted to, as regular cups were counted as inventory. However, this was the complete undoing. I heard her call me a witch under her breath. For the most part, I ignored it. Over and over, she squealed about a free Slurpee, how I was ripping her off, etc. I was about to get her hot food when she reached over the counter and went, "You must be proud of yourself. Kicking out a dog. Look at your face. Your mother probably never wanted you. You should have been aborted. You're a screw-up. That's why you work here, you miserable dumb jerk." At this point, she was loud and 10 other customers were shaking their heads. I suspended the transaction, told her to leave. I was just beyond fed up. "You have to serve me," she shrieked. "No, I don't. You're being hostile, and I won't be abused. Please go, or I'll call the police. You're unwelcome." I turned my back, set her items behind the register, and hoped she'd just go if I ignored her. "It's my right. Give me my stuff." She repeated over and over again. She continued to hurl insults at me. Then she began to insult other customers. She was becoming so hostile that I'd already called the police. She was approaching customers trying to explain herself, and when they ignored her, she was cursing them as she did me. I told her over and over to go. She can't abuse my paying customers, and she was unwelcome. Each request to leave was met with obscene insults and cussing. One man had enough and forced her out of the store. Just walking into her, she finally left the store. I thought finally, what an entitled idiot. About a minute goes by and my coworker and I are trying to ring through more people. She comes back into the store. I've finally had enough of this. As soon as she opens the door, I yell no. "Get out. You're not allowed in here. You need to go." She comes charging up to the counter, knocking over displays, and is yelling absolute nonsense, mostly cussing, telling me it's a public space. She can be here. This went on for another 5 minutes. My coworker, Liz, a French native, tells her to go. She's normally shy and quiet, the type who avoids any confrontation. I was shocked she even spoke up. She mistakes Liz as Middle Eastern, mocks an accent, and begins to tell her to go back to her own country, telling her no one wants to be blown up, calls her fat while throwing more merchandise to the ground. Liz laughs in her face and simply just says she's being obnoxious and racist and she needs to go. She asks for my name. I give it to her. I gave her our corporate number. Tell her this entire thing was on camera, and she can call all she wants. My patience has hit rock bottom, and every other word from my mouth is, "Lady, you need to leave." The man from before, finally annoyed, yells at this lady, tells her to go or he will make her go. This is finally what makes this lady leave. She speeds through the parking lot, laying in the horn, and goes, "Freaking finally." I call my boss because I know Karen is going to complain, and I tell her what happened. I thought this was the end of this. A day later, I'm called in. Oh, here we go. Complaint from Karen. The complaint stated I threatened to beat her up over her service dog. She's a frail old lady, and I came out of the store and threatened to key her car. I swore at her, embarrassed her, threw merchandise at her, and I should be fired or she will seek further legal action. This complaint was so far from the truth, I was actually laughing in front of my bosses who were stone-faced believing this woman and thinking they were about to be sued. Of course, given the circumstances of the allegations, this went to legal and other managers above us. Finally, a few days later, after reviewing footage and even customers who called in to talk to my manager about being verbally abused by this lady themselves, they finally tell this lady that she is unwelcome here and she will have a no trespass order placed. I was within my rights as an employee, and they told her, "Your complaint was bogus. We checked the cameras." My district manager even apologized to me. I thought, wow, what a disaster. But I'm glad I prevailed. That has to be the end. Nah, of course not. For over 2.5 months after, Karen had her friends come into the store with dogs, all to elicit a reaction. They'd come in and say, "I saw the sign, but can I have him in here?" Of course, they weren't allowed. They know this, and Karen was waiting outside for a reaction. When I informed my boss of this, she checked the cameras and confirmed it was Karen from earlier trying to provoke me and had her criminally charged with trespassing. That was finally the end of the entire ordeal. So yeah. Be careful when trying to make sure your customers don't get bit from Karen's Chihuahua. She will try to have you fired. Some background. I work in the military as a medic and live in the barracks. All the personnel living in my barracks work at the hospital as medics too. The way our barracks room is set up, there are 2 rooms that house 1 person each and a small, shared common space with 1 bathroom. Since the pandemic, the commanding officer of the base had people living in the barracks to double up to make room to quarantine those who are from the ships. So now each room had 2 people, a total of 4 people, sharing a tiny common space. I didn't have to move rooms, but someone moved into mine, so I had to make space. We'll call her Sally. The room was already small, so cramming another person was less than ideal, but there's nothing we can do. I was also a minimalist, so I was able to give Sally more than half my living space and allowed her to hang up any artwork or photos to make it more comfortable for her. I also had an extra mattress foam topper that I gave her because the beds are awful. At first, I thought she was okay. I laid out my rules clearly because I've had troubling roommates before. My rules were simple. 1, don't have people over or throw barracks parties in my room because, social distancing and I still have valuables and I don't know her friends. 2, be clean. 3, if I do something you don't like, tell me right away. No passive-aggressive crap, and I'll do the same. She seemed to be okay with the rules, but boy, was I wrong. The hospital we worked at had each department manning down 50%, so we didn't work every day, and Sally and I had different schedules. The nights before I worked, she would go to some other person's room to party. Not allowed, but none of my business. But she would come home around midnight plastered drunk, making a lot of noise, and go into our fridge. That was in our tiny room that she stuffed with alcohol way above the allowed amount, and grab more alcohol while lighting up the whole room and clinking the bottles. She'd leave and then come back again around 3, making even more noise, and before she goes to bed, she would play the TV full volume and light up the whole room or have her Alexa blast heavy bass music that shook the room. This would happen nearly every night. I already have insomnia and have mental problem, and not sleeping wasn't helping. I confronted her about it, and she said okay, but she didn't change. I've talked to my chain of command, and they couldn't do anything because rooms are limited, but they offered to talk to her chain. We work different departments. The other 2 roommates in the other room even told her to keep the noise down at night, and one even called her out for being stupid and selfish. Sally didn't care. I ended up buying a $300 noise-canceling headset to drown out her boss and other ruckus. Things got worse when I was put on night shift. I'd sleep throughout the day and my shifts were 12, 14 hours, so I was exhausted when I got home. Thankfully, she stayed out most of the day so I was able to sleep. But when I would come home, I would clean up after her before I would sleep. Trash was everywhere. I'd vacuum. I even bought her a small drawer so she has more storage. One day after work, I came home and I couldn't find my new headset. In the middle of looking for them, Sally came home for lunch, and I asked her where they were. She found them on her bedpost. I asked why they were there. Oh, they fell from the side table, so they moved them. Sally said, they? This is when she knew she screwed up. Yeah, I had a few people over last night. Me, trying to be calm. Why did you have people over last night? I told you that I wasn't comfortable with that because I don't know your friends. These are expensive headphones. I know, I apologize. They were just trying to move them out of the way. Another thing, I left my headset on my bed. Why would they be in the way? Sally was silent for a few minutes as she knew she screwed up again. Don't have people on my bed. And I don't care if you party somewhere else. Just don't do it here. After she left, I let my chain know what happened and that I'm not comfortable sleeping in my own bed. Chain is trying to help, but moving me is still low priority. Since we're in the middle of a pandemic and all. Fast forward a few days, I came home from work and I noticed my bed was messed up. I smelled my covers and noticed someone else's smell. I immediately washed my sheets and told my chain again. I worked again that same night and was now going to lose some shut-eye because I have to wash my stuff. I confronted her again and she half apologized. I knew that no matter what I say, she is still going to do what she wants. Since I've been working nights, she's been blasting her bass all throughout the night. And not only can the other two roommates hear her and have asked her to turn it down, the 4 people living directly below us can hear her and have asked her to turn it down. She would say okay to everyone but continued to do what she wanted. Finally, someone filed a noise complaint about her to her chain. Sally came home crying, saying, I can't sleep with headphones because I move a lot in my sleep and they will come off. And I need the bass because it helps me sleep, as in my favorite one to the other 2 roommates, I leave the deadbolt open on my door so you can come in the room and tell Alexa to turn off when I sleep. I don't like having the door open, but I do it as a favor for you. She claimed to have been assaulted during a room inspection and doesn't like having the door bolted open. But she is the only one that bolts the front door open too, that leads to the hallway so anyone can come in every night. But hey, you can choose to believe her or not. After that day, things were tense, but she turned the music down, but she still was a stupid drunk every other night and had people over. She tried to make me look like the bad roommate, and she was a victim somehow. But I volunteer a lot and have a lot of friends throughout the hospital, including her upper chain, so no one believed her. Finally, she did something that would get me away from her forever. I came home one night and saw trash as usual and started putting things away and cleaning up. There was a trash bag that wasn't there before I left. While putting her things away in her drawer, I saw a crap load of needles and gloves, about 15 syringe needles. I immediately messaged a friend who worked in her department and asked if they were allowed to bring home needles. He said no, and that he was working duty last night at the hospital, and Sally came in drunk at 8 p.m., literally 30 minutes after I left for work. The people working duty didn't know she was drunk at first, and Sally asked if they could let her in her work area for something. One person didn't see why not, and let her in without supervising her. This is when they suspect she snuck the needles. When they checked on her, they realized she was drunk and kicked her out. My friend advised me to make a video as evidence that it's hers because he was now liable to report the incident. As I was talking to my friend, I was still cleaning, and as I was tossing trash in the trash bag, I saw so many bloody gauzes and uncapped needles in the plastic bag. Sharps have to be tossed in a sharps container and where I'm at. Locals go through the trash and properly sort them. And if a local was to get stuck by one of those needles, the base would get in so much trouble. So I recorded that too. A roommate from the other room came home, and I asked her if people were over the night before, and she said yes, and I showed her the bag and drawer of needles and asked if she knew anything about it, and she was just as shocked as I was. The revenge. Finally, I sent everything to my chain and was interviewed by Sally Chain and told them everything and was moved out that day. The military police were called to my room to investigate. Unfortunately, Sally came home before them because someone warned her. She had the audacity to move the needles in the common area to try to blame another roommate, but my video evidence, the testimonies from myself and the other roommate, and her history shuts her down. When I moved out, I took everything, from the drawers I bought her, the hooks on the wall, my blackout curtains, my cleaning supplies, my extension cords, to the pins on the corkboard. Additionally, the commanding officer put her on restriction for 30 days, and she had no electronics and had extra duty, and deducted 2 months of half pay, which runs up to be $2,000. The best revenge is how she's now socially outcast from all this. During the investigation, she threw so many people under the bus to try to save herself. She might have gotten more punishments, but that was all I heard. She already has a reputation of getting irresponsibly drunk, getting into fights, lying, and skipping out of work. I've talked to her chain, and they've described her as selfish and a pathological liar and don't pity her. This event just showed everyone her true colors. Another ending. Because of my event, the hospital commanding officer had to investigate what the base commanding officer did. and saw that the quarantine rooms were never used to their max occupancy, and the ships at this point had their own quarantine system. Everyone in the barracks was able to move back to their original rooms, and no one was doubled up anymore. Also, I was never told what she used the needles for. She tested negative for drugs, and there was no evidence of drug use in the room. I have a friend who works for digital agencies doing analytics for Fortune 500 core. Let's call him Dan. And usually those agencies don't do much more than proxying the contractor and surcharging a percentage on every hour. They actually rarely contribute anything to the work process or end product. They sometimes wouldn't even have an account manager involved. They would just literally resell the contractor. And usually those agencies are smart enough to shut the heck up and not bother the client or the contractor. They know that they actually have no reasonable justification for the surcharge. Well, in this case, Dan's agency, I think it was Cardinal Path at the time, suddenly started asking for more detailed timesheets. You see, more senior contractors usually won't bother. They would have some generic one-liner like, worked an Aether's charge towards that, because it's not really worth it to go and detail everything. The client would know what work the contractor would have done anyhow, so they would approve the timesheet if they don't exceed the weekly limit, which is 40 hours usually. My friend, of course, pushed back and asked the client whether they needed that level of detail. The client had no problems with the timesheets whatsoever, and when he raised it with the agency's manager, they informed him that it was a new corporate policy or something to that extent. Well, Dan had to comply, and he started charging the agency for it. He started adding time expenses unrelated to the client work, stuff the agency casually got used to getting for free. Two-factor authentications, trashy corporate mass, emails, any kind of correspondence with the agency staff like accountants, account managers, PEEMs, useless recurring learning courses, etc., 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 and of course the time wasted on timesheet. In total, it would have effectively been anywhere from 4 to 8 hours a week. He got himself almost one whole paid day off effectively. He told the client that his capacity on Fridays would have been lessened due to the new rules the agency pushed, so he blocked the whole day to avoid any meetings. That would effectively leave his whole Friday to himself. The client actually kind of liked it, because Fridays were half days off normally for their regular staff. Plus, no production releases were allowed on Fridays anyhow, but they couldn't enforce the half days on contractors. And basically what it meant to the client is that they would have to pay less to the agency for Fridays. Now, not only the agency lost 4 to 8 hours a week of their profit, they now introduced an expense cuz those 4 to 8 hours they lost now suddenly became a liability that they had to pay for cuz these hours were billable, of course. Dan's hour back then was over $100. Let's just pretend it was $100 per hour. The agency likely charged at least double, so $200 per hour. So the net difference would have been 100 times 6 equals $600 from their net revenue, plus $100 an hour for 6 hours that they would have to now to pay out of their own pocket. $1,200 a week. Not bad, not bad. Seems a reasonable cost for a more detailed timesheet, eh? They freaked out. There was a lot of back and forth. In the end, what? You think they removed the requirement? You haven't worked much for bureaucracies, eh? No, they just went with it. Lulz. My dear friend worked there for another year, effectively having Fridays off, and then left the agency when they started pushing new corporate contracts onto the contractors. And the new contracts were kind of unreasonable. Asked for some odd things, one of which would be to fill the timesheets immediately after a given task was completed. He pushed back, but the director at the agency claimed they couldn't change anything in the contracts, since these new contracts were coming from Dentsu, the parent agency that would have apparently acquired Cardinal Path around that time. Since the first one was much more appreciated than I could have hoped, I began looking into old anecdotes, and I remembered this gem from 2011. Again, a small, preemptive excuse since English is not my first language. Sadly, or luckily, I don't remember any more stories that fit this particular sub. That said, here we go. At that time, I was 26, just out of the university with my title and master both completed by December 2010. Almost immediately, I went into a big engineering company, specialized in tall building. I was still green with little to no experience in the real world, and by nature. I'm also evasive when it comes to conflict, so I'm not exactly the wise choice when it comes to clashing against aggressive or too dominant people. Still, I was able to fake confidence and capable enough to quickly gain the trust of clients. Because of that, I was already managing projects with some degree of autonomy at 6 months in the job. That said, it was November, already very warm weather, Chile, so summer in November, and the office was working at its usual pace. That is, calm but 2 steps away from total panic. It was morning when my boss called me. Let's call him Ray. He is a great guy, professional but often a bit dense when it comes to social cues. To this day, we're still good friends, despite both not working there anymore. When I arrive at his desk, he pulls a set of schematics. Hey, I have a meeting this afternoon with this particular client, but I cannot go. They have some kind of issues, so it's important that someone from the office is there if things go difficult. Difficult? I ask. Yeah, they screwed up and want to blame us. Still, everything is on the drawings. You shouldn't have any issues. Sure, I'll take it. The meeting time came, and I went off the taxi in front of this 22-story office building. The lobby was already finished in floors of black marble and roof and white marble, with diffuse white lighting. Round, double-height columns, stainless steel. As I enter, something calls my attention. There are scratches on the floor. Oh, also in the columns. Heck, also in the doors. This is bad. These are telltale signs of horrible construction management. I take the stairs to the 4th floor and the construction auditor, Phil, receives me. He is a large guy with a short beard and stern but amicable face. So, you are X? What happened to Ray? Phil asked. Hi, yes, he sent me to be in his place. Well, we're about to start. Just sit by my side and don't intervene unless it is necessary. Anything I need to know? I ask. He smiles back at me with a grin. Just wait and enjoy. So, we enter this large improvised meeting room. There is electricity, but the floor is still bare concrete, and the doors are temporary. The table is enough for maybe 20 people. On the corner, there is a small guy with a curved back and sketchy appearance. He could be described as a weasel in office attire. No one pays any attention to my presence as everyone is taking seats. I sit beside Phil near the middle of the table. The weasel on the far head and the closest head is still empty. That guy is the construction manager. He is blaming us for the screw-up. He says, pointing at the weasel. We wait for maybe 5 minutes with only a rumor of the small conversations in the place. Finally, the door opens and a peacock-like office Chad enters. Black trousers, white and pink vertical striped shirt, and big golden sunglasses where a helmet should have been. A large golden watch, kettlebell size, completed the image. Sorry, I'm late. Let's begin, the meeting Chad announces. I assume for his commanding tone, he is the representative of the owners. After some minimal greeting to all the people in the room by the architect, he gives the word to Chad. I take a glance at Phil. He is expectant. Now, Chad raises from the table, points to the weasel, and the party starts. Explain to me how the heck you forgot to build doors for the elevator's machine room. We are already delayed a month. You made a freaking mess in the lobby, and now we have to demolish a wall so the elevator people can enter. Okay, sir, the weasel answered. First of all, these changes have been asked by you. You asked for the lobby to be left ready while I still have to work with people there, and you have it fully scratched. How the heck is that my responsibility? Turns out, Chad and the weasel not only were severely unprofessional, but also hated each other with such passion that they had to be put in opposite sides of the table, because more than once they went too close to a fistfight. They discussed screaming at each other for maybe 5 minutes. Chad is fully aggressive and red, attacking relentlessly. The manager, just as his appearance suggests, sneaks in between all the attacks and deflects responsibilities, blaming everything under the sun. The rest of the assistants are just expecting to let time pass quickly and leave, but Phil is happy. He was one step away from having some popcorn. I lean to him and whisper, so they forgot an access for the machine room? Not only that, but the weasel also declared some construction molds as stolen and they made an investigation. Turns out they are still inside the closed room. What? I ask a bit louder. Hey kid, Chad addresses me disrespectfully. Shut up. And then he goes back to the fight. After some more punches back and forth, the weasel is running out from ways to deflect his mistake. He tried one more. But this wasn't our fault. The door was not in the structural engineer's drawings. He forms a smug smile. Plus, Ray didn't even come to the meeting. If any penalties are to be applied, it should be for them for their incompetence. Boy, that was my cue. I clear my throat but fail in the first impression, entering in a timid way. Well, shut up, kid. The weasel snaps and looks to Phil. Phil, keep your assistant quiet. I decided to make them understand more clearly. I pulled a set of schematics, letting them fall heavily over the table and catching the attention of both Chad and the weasel. Over the schematics, I put my construction helmet with the logo of the engineering firm. Silence takes the place. If I may, I now speak in front of a pale weasel and a Chad who internally debates if showing shame for calling me kid or do a victory lap around the weasel. I'm actually a structural engineer from X company, and Ray sent me to represent him because his schedule was full. Mind if we check what appears on the drawings? Here we are. Yes, as you can see, the door is here, and I think this cannot be attributed to confusion from structural design. I agree, Phil comments with a huge smile. The rest of the table is trying to hide their amusement. I continue. So that settles it. I can make a procedure here for the demolition and installation of the access, or if you prefer, I can send it approved by Ray by tomorrow. Everyone is silent, in a second of contained storm. But Phil isn't done yet. He leans in and puts his hands over the table. Now, we need to see what we will do to recover the supposedly stolen equipment that is still trapped inside the machine room. And what will you do about the 2 workers you fired this morning? He looks to the weasel, who is just about to melt and escapes by the first crack he can find. Chad now turns into a raging volcano. He was so furious that his blood pressure could have been measured in atmospheres. You fired people without proof? And then another, maybe 5 minutes of berating exploded until the architect, who was supposed to be coordinating the meeting, called a truce so they could advance with the problems of the electric and water crews. Phil and I were dismissed, but while the door was closing, I could hear Chad screaming again. I sighed, relieved. Truth is, I was shaking a little. What a mess. Nah, this was a quiet meeting, Phil said, smiling. Tell Ray he missed a good one. Pleased to meet you, kid. In the end, the construction was finished with 5 months of delay. Both the Weasel and Chad were fired from their respective companies. Ray just laughed at my story and told me it was good that Chad hadn't tried to punch me because he wanted to fight everyone all the time. I never found those 2 again, but I found Phil on another project 2 years after. Same mischievous old man. To my luck, to this day, I never had another meeting like that dreadful one.